Race the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more to reach the professionals who are more likely to find your ad relevant. Plus, with 1 billion members on LinkedIn, that means you'll have access to 130 million decision makers and 10 million C-level executives. That's a lot of millions of the right people. Get started today and see how you can reach the right buyers with LinkedIn's enhanced targeting tools. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
Support comes from ServiceNow. We're for people doing the creative work they actually want to do. That's why this ad was written and read by a real person and not AI. You know what people don't want to do? Boring, busy work. Now with AI agents built into the ServiceNow platform, you can automate millions of repetitive tasks in every corner of your business, IT, HR, and more, so your people can focus on the work that they want to do. That's putting AI agents to work for people. It's your turn. Visit servicenow.com.
Welcome to That Analytics podcast, the show where you'll learn how to measure your marketing so you can make better decisions that save you time and save you money. Who wouldn't want that? I'll be your host, Amanda Webb. Today's guest is Thomas Gleeson from StoreHero, and I have to say, he's a very smart business person. StoreHero is a platform that sits alongside Shopify and other tools, so you can use it with WooCommerce and other e-commerce tools as well. And Thomas is essentially obsessed with making sure you're making profit from your e-commerce store. And he has a background, like when he was a kid, he wasn't doing like the dishes for his mother. He was doing the SEO for his mother. So he's been in this game a long time and he really understands how it works. And he really knows how you can actually make a profit and make sure that you're not just spending all your money on ads or discounts or sales. I think it's a fascinating episode. I hope you enjoy it. Now, before I share this interview with you, I want to ask you a question, because I know this comes up. I wonder, or do you wonder, if you should be spending more time on your analytics? Or do you actually think, what's the point of analytics? Does it really matter if you're not looking at your analytics? Does it really matter if it's not set up properly? Does it just seem like a whole lot of hassle to look at that when you could be happily doing whatever bits of your job you really love doing? Well, if so, I've put together a webinar that will help you get to grips with your Google Analytics so that you actually can see how it's going to save you time and money with your marketing. And it really, really does do that. You're going to find the exact reports and the metrics that you need to measure to see what's working in your marketing. And that means no more avoiding analytics. That means no more staring at that wall of data when you guiltily log in and think, I need to look at this. You're going to understand what's going on. So you can grab your free seat to this webinar now at spiderworking.com/webinar. So that spider, that scary 8-legged creature, working, like doing a job. So a spider doing a job.com/webinar. Over to the interview with Thomas Gleeson from StoreHero. Today's guest is Thomas from StoreHero. Hello, Thomas. How are you?
Hey, Amanda. Really, really nice to be on the show. Really looking forward to chatting to you this morning. I'm all good.
I'm delighted to have an Irish guest on because, as most of the people who know me know, even though I've got this English accent, I've been based in Ireland for almost 30 years. So it's always good to have someone from Ireland on. And I'm really excited to have you on because I think you've been really smart at promoting what you do. So actually you were the top of my list when it came to doing these podcasts. So firstly, before we get into StoreHero, which is what you do and what we should be measuring and not measuring for an e-commerce business, tell us where this started for you. How did you get into marketing?
Yeah, it's quite a long story actually. My mother has actually had an e-commerce business in Ennis in County Clare called wowwe.ie, actually for 20 years, so quite a while. That was a very much, small family business at the start, kind of grew over time. The nature with any family business is that, it's all hands on deck for everybody. I often kind of tell a story where in a lot of houses, maybe it was hoovering the hall or cleaning the car was the chores. We were doing SEO on Mam's website, maybe when I was 10 or 11, 12 years old. She always said it would stand to us. I never probably believed her, but 20 years later, I'm still here doing this. So maybe she was right. So yeah, I mean, it was very interesting kind of to grow up in that house, to be honest with you. Wowwe.ie is kind of personalized gifts, baby gifts, wedding gifts, Christmas gifts, that kind of thing. It was an interesting start. People have, for instance, we actually just grew the business. I say we, mainly my mother, grew the business primarily through SEO only for probably 12 years, which for anybody listening today, which is, everybody's spending heavily on Meta and Google, that kind of sounds like a pipe dream, to be able to grow a business purely through organic mechanisms. But e-commerce wasn't as rosy as that sounds back then. You didn't have the technological infrastructure like Shopify out there today. I remember vividly days coming home. She would come home from work and the checkout would be broken, or this piece of tech will be broken, that piece of tech will be broken. So yes, I mean, you didn't have the constraint that a lot of e-commerce businesses have today around rising customer acquisition costs, but you also didn't have that kind of technological infrastructure that I kind of spoke to there as well. So I suppose, yeah, we grew up working in the family business, doing everything from SEO. Then I suppose when maybe 2016, I kind of started, figuring out what a Facebook pixel was. What is that? We were doing a bit of boost posting. I'm sure everybody's familiar with that, listening to this as well. But, really trying to understand how do we retarget customers and that kind of thing. And that was really interesting. For the first time, seeing the levels of granularity that you could get to target individuals, and then being able to actually understand, okay, how many purchases have I driven from that order, from that ad? What's it costing me to get a purchase? This was not data that we ever had before. And yes, it sounds very normal for everybody listening to this podcast to understand that right now. But like, that was 8 years ago. It's a long time in the scheme of e-commerce, I actually set up my first e-commerce business myself in 2014. So it was a business called Stories About You. And essentially what that was a personalized gifts book business that I actually did with my granddad, would you believe? So my granddad is a brilliant artist and he would paint the books originally. So I wrote 4 or 5. I think there was one about hurling, Gaelic football. For any of your English guests, there are 2 Irish sports, Christmas, First Holy Communion, and kind of going back to primary school. So the idea was that you could pop in your child's name, their county, their favorite team, favorite player, and they come on and match and score the winning goal. And, the book is very tailored to them and personalized to them as well. So I started that in 2014, probably ran that for 5 years. Never really made a whole lot of money out of it, to be honest with you. But what it did give me was a massive grounding in e-commerce and really just trying to figure everything out. Again, trying to hone in on what I had done for Mam's business, really trying to figure out SEO, setting up a website which wasn't on Shopify originally. It was on a platform called Volusion. It then moved over to Shopify in 2019. But figuring out how to buy products, figuring out how to set up an email marketing campaign, running my own Facebook and Google ads, that kind of thing as well. It was definitely an exponential learning curve at a younger age that definitely stood the test of time to me. I know I'm kind of going on here, but it's quite a detailed story. From there I think it was, I said I moved the business over to Shopify, my own business. I think it was January 2019. I'm not sure if anybody listening is familiar with a platform called Udemy, basically an online learning platform. And I found a course online to how to build a Shopify store for $20. And I found a couple of them, and I did them all in the space of probably 2 months, and then moved my own business over. And I actually ended up setting up another kind of, artificial plants pots, tables, kind of home care tables, that kind of thing, business also on Shopify. Just to I was in the weeds with it every day, and it was interesting. That June, I think it was probably 2019, I actually came across an ad on Facebook to work at Shopify directly as a support rep. And I mean, I was kind of just looking at Shopify all day, every day at that stage. So I thought, what better place to go and learn how to run an e-commerce business than go and work at the company who has the most e-commerce businesses in the world on there. And I ended up getting the job. It was class. It was an amazing experience. So the original support role was, helping people with everyday business owners with, the everyday problems. How do I add my domain name? My product page is broken. I need to add a Facebook pixel. More technical based questions. The parts of those conversations I would really, really enjoy was when people said, I'm trying to improve my average order value. I'm trying to improve my conversion rate. My Facebook ads aren't working. I didn't actually really enjoy the technical side of it, if I'm going to be completely honest. But I really loved what Shopify kind of termed as those merchant growth conversations. That was kind of the first foray at Shopify. And then I kind of moved through a couple of different roles. I spent about 3.5 years there, but the last 2 years, I was essentially working in Shopify Plus. And for everybody who's not familiar with Shopify Plus, is essentially the kind of the tier for bigger businesses within the platform. So the first kind of year in that role was working with essentially as a consultant for brands between about 5 and 15 million. And then the last year I was working with brands between 25 and 200 million. And that was an incredible experience because you're literally working with the biggest brands in the UK. You're speaking to the owners every day of the week. And I'll just tell you, Amanda, they don't all have it figured out. They worry about the same things you and I do on a daily basis. But it was a really, really interesting experience to hear these guys talk about, what they're planning, how they're thinking about it, what they're concerned about, what the problems they have. And, for me, that was the dream job to land because very quickly I was just in front of the best and the biggest e-commerce and Shopify brands in Europe, speaking directly to the founders. And for me, that was just exactly what I went to Shopify for. It was to try and just soak up as much industry knowledge as possible. And I suppose, to kind of summarize, that's how my marketing and e-commerce journey really began.
So that's huge. So firstly, you were born into this, which people my age are a little bit jealous about because we didn't even have the internet till I was in my 20s. And secondly, also, you're really annoying because you're one of those serial entrepreneurs that just keeps trying things. And again, that makes people like me really jealous. And also, thirdly, I'm really glad to hear that, because I think a lot of businesses think everyone else is better than them, is everyone else is smarter than them. So it's really good to hear that some of those big business owners are in the same position as a lot of us. And with Shopify, which is obviously, we'll talk about StoreHero in a moment, because Shopify is the obvious choice now, I think, for as much as I love WordPress, I hate setting up analytics on WordPress, on WooCommerce because it's so complicated. Shopify really has everything in place to make e-commerce easy for small businesses. So it really makes sense for them to do that, but it is lacking in some areas, and that's really what we're gonna talk about. Or out of the box, it is lacking in some areas. So firstly, the biggest issue for small businesses now who have an e-commerce store, you talked about installing the Facebook pixel back 8 years ago, which does seem like another century ago in the world of e-commerce. What's the situation now? What is the problem for businesses that might be using Meta ads now?
Yeah, I mean, even just kind of to take a step back before we go into that, 2020, obviously, we won't mention the C word, but the C word basically meant that we had a massive influx of loads of new businesses online for the very first time. Many retailers, smaller businesses who weren't thinking about e-commerce were all forced online at one time. It was a crazy time, really. You had that happen, so everybody was forced online. And then you also had this other thing happen where everybody was locked up at home all day. And what do you do when you're locked up at home all day? You're on your phone, you're scrolling all day, you're on your laptop. But from a Facebook and Google perspective, what that means is there's so much people on their phones, and anybody who's running ads, you have so many eyeballs to get to those ads. And really what I'm trying to get to is you had a position where there was way more new stores, a lot of them online for the very, very first time, coupled with this situation where everybody was home on their phones. So ad prices were actually on the floor. Again, people don't really think about that because everyone was in lockdown. Everybody was on their phones. That just meant ad prices were really, really low. And then coupled with that, you had, checks being sent out to everybody. people couldn't really spend their money. So people had way more just, extra cash in their pockets than they probably ever had in a lot of cases before. Not everybody, but for a lot of consumers, it actually was a good time financially. So all those things combined just meant that you actually really couldn't have created better macro conditions for an e-commerce business if you tried. All physical stores are closed, ad prices are on the floor, consumer has loads of money. I mean, it was set up absolutely perfect for it. Now, the challenge brands have had we see it obviously every day, but I'm sure you see it as well, Amanda. The problem brands have had, in my opinion, in maybe the last 2-3 years, is that, physical retail has reopened. Obviously, all the shops are back open. Nobody's on their phone as much as they were. So that, coupled with way more new stores online, has just really driven the cost of advertising for e-commerce businesses, to a point, unfortunately, for a lot of businesses where it's unsustainable. They're really, really struggling. And that we kind of call it the Facebook or the Google tax. A lot of brands that are advertising now, the cost to acquire a customer in some cases has doubled or tripled from what it was 2-3 years ago. And, if paid marketing, and unfortunately it is the case, for an e-commerce business, you rely on paid marketing to drive your business forward. And if it's now costing you double or triple to acquire a new customer, that's a huge tax that has suddenly been placed on your business that you mightn't have had before. And it's definitely an area that we see an awful lot of brands are struggling with. And I suppose they're really just struggling to quantify, is paid marketing worth it? Am I making the right decisions? Like, you need to make as a business owner, hundreds of decisions, micro decisions on a daily basis. But if e-com is your primary mechanism to drive sales, the decision around how much do I spend on advertising is probably one of the most important decisions on a daily basis that you need to make. And it's often one of the most difficult decisions to make as well. So those two things combined just, make it a challenging time for brands.
You've been in business a long time. You've been in business since you were a toddler, basically. And I remember the time when Google Ads, we went through exactly the same thing with Google Ads. Google Ads used to be as cheap as chips. You could, as long as somebody wanted to buy your product, if you put an ad up, you would sell it, you would make profit. So is this the second wave that we're talking about here?
Yeah, I think so. Shopify have made it really easy to start an e-com business. If you open up a shop, this is not an ad for Shopify, by the way, but if you wanted to set up an e-commerce business today, you can log on to Shopify. You could probably be live with a new product in an hour if you put your mind to it. That's just a million miles away from where things were even 10 years ago, like so far away. That's really easy to set up. The thing I often say to people is, yes, I mean, it's never been easier to start an e-commerce business, but I think the problem is it's never been more challenging to grow that business profitably. Because, once the barrier to entry is dropped and it's really easy for everyone to set up a store, everyone's coming online. Like, the amount of new Shopify stores that are set up on a daily basis is incredible. Now, the problem with that is you've way more competition, coupled with the fact that rising customer acquisition costs, which you just touched on there, mean that to, start getting that first 10 sales and making sure that they're profitable is really, really hard today. And I think there's probably I often get asked, what business would you start tomorrow? And to be honest with you, I don't have a specific business in mind if it was an e-commerce business, but there's like 4 key pillars that I would ensure the business would need to have. And what are they? So number 1 would be, really healthy gross margin. So when I talk about gross margin, I'm not just talking about your product cost, taking out your product cost, product packing, shipping, transaction, fulfillment fees, any return costs. After you take out all of those fees, what does your gross margin look like? I think for an e-commerce business today, that needs to be at 60% minimum. A lot of brands that we're working with StoreHero, that's around 30%. And that's a really, really hard business to scale today because, as we've just touched on, the cost to acquire customers is just going north, unfortunately. So if you're starting with a really low base of gross margin, that's going to be a hard business to scale profitably. Number 2 would be, capacity to have a really high repeat purchase rate. Even though we're all the best marketers in the world listening to this podcast, if you are working at a brand that sells sofas and sofas only, there's no way you can influence your customers to buy a new sofa every 3 months. It's just not going to be possible. So how do you think about, and what I'm trying to say there is you need to think about the product that you're going to start your e-commerce business and the capacity of your customers to repeat purchase that product over a specific cadence over a certain period of time. Really good examples of this would be, pet food, beauty products, supplements, that kind of thing, where your customers will probably look to come back every 30, 60, 90 days. The beauty of a business like that is it almost acts like a software business to a certain extent. You buy once, sell 100 times, whatever it's going to be. Because the more times you can get your customer to repeat and come back, that just means you can afford to spend more and more upfront on the initial acquisition of that customer. And that's just a really, really important piece that brands need to take into account. The third one is just being a seriously good operator and keeping a very, very lean team. I typically would like to see operating costs as a percentage of your net sales to be at like 10 to 12% of your overall revenue. If you can do that, that tells me you can run a really, really lean business. And that is just so important today, as that kind of Facebook and Google tax is being applied to businesses as well. And the last one I would say is brand with a capital B. And what I mean by that is if you're selling a product, don't just make it a product. Don't just run bottom of funnel conversion campaigns. It's never been more important to invest in your brand. Once you can build a brand and get customers hooked on who you are as a brand, what you stand for, and just being very, very familiar with the brand, that will massively help your organic growth of the business, your referrals from existing customers to new customers. But it would also allow you to price your products higher. Just to give you an example, one Finnish shoe brand I'm working with at the moment, they increased their prices by 30% in January, and that's a big spike. They're not cheap shoes as it is. Now, what they were terrified. I was speaking to the e-commerce manager before he did it, and he's like, "I think this is a terrible decision, but it's come from the top. I need to just follow my orders." The thing was, they saw like a 1 or 2% drop in conversion rate. So what they realized was the brand had become so strong that they were very inelastic in the minds of their customers, and therefore the price increase actually didn't really affect the purchasing behavior of the customer. And all that increase in the price of the product just allowed them to acquire way more new customers, and the business is just much better off and in a much more profitable.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more to reach the professionals who are more likely to find your ad relevant. Plus, with 1 billion members on LinkedIn, that means you'll have access to 130 million decision makers and 10 million C-level executives. That's a lot of millions of the right people. Get started today and see how you can reach the right buyers with LinkedIn's enhanced targeting tools. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Prime Video. In the small town of Holland, Michigan, nothing is ever what it seems. Behind the tulip festivals and pretty houses lay dark secrets that threaten to tear a marriage apart. Nicole Kidman stars in this darkly twisted thriller about a wife and mother whose quest to uncover her husband's secrets may get her more than she bargained for. Holland, streaming on Prime Video, March 27th.
Position. Just to recap, I would have really strong gross margins. Make sure that you have repeat purchase capacity built into the product that you want to start. Being a really, really good operator, ensuring that you have a lean team, try and keep those operating expenses under about 12%, and making sure that you're investing and building a brand more so than just a store that sells a specific product.
Great. And I think, to me, two things have come out of that. So firstly, I'm imagining, even though people are tuning into the analytics show, that there are a lot of people that aren't even measuring these things at all. So I think we'll talk about that in a second. Secondly, operating costs. What goes into that? What would you include? So that should be 12% of your costs of running the business. Is that what you're saying? Or 12% of your margin? Or
Yeah, great question. So let's just say you're a brand doing $1 million a year. Or let's just say 500K a year for the sake of simplicity. I would love to see your operating costs at 12% of that. So, about what's that, 60K maybe. So included in that, you're going to have your staff costs, rent costs, any software fees. I would probably, if you're paying an agency, I would put that in your marketing costs, not in your operating expenses. There's a slight distinction, which we'll come on to in a few minutes. But yeah, staff costs, rent costs, that kind of thing, if within that kind of 12% bracket.
And I'm sure there's lots of people that aren't even thinking about that in the first place. And a lot of small businesses that are thinking about themselves, sure, I just take a bit of money out when I've got a bit of money. So I think that's something I would like people to take a step back from. I think people are often so busy marketing their business, because that's fun, as far as I'm concerned, anyway, that they forget about all the different bits they want to measure. So with that, let's talk a little bit about StoreHero, because in some ways that's a bit of a solution to some of these problems, particularly if you're relying on things like what your Facebook ads are telling you, your ROAS is. That can always seem, oh, look, I've got this much return on my ad spend, and you're not really looking further down the line. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so StoreHero is a tool that myself and my co-founder Carl O'Brien have built over the last 2 years. So we're now working with over 400 e-commerce brands, and essentially what StoreHero does was allow you to plug in your Shopify, your WooCommerce, your Magento, your BigCommerce store, all of your Google Analytics, your Search Console, your email marketing, your Facebook, Google, TikTok ads. But most importantly, we also bring in your true shipping costs, your fulfillment fees, your return costs, transaction fees. And why does any of that matter? We want to help brands actually understand in real time, as they're dialing up and down their marketing spend, are they more or less profitable as a result? We see a huge problem at the moment in the e-com landscape, in that every business I'm speaking to, their customer acquisition costs are rising. We just touched on that quite extensively. On top of that, yes, they're spending more to acquire a customer. They're also spending more on marketing in general than they probably ever have before. So you couple those two things together, costing us way more to acquire, Mary as a new customer, and to acquire 20 Marys, we're also spending just way more in general as a fixed fee. The problem I have with that with a lot of businesses is I ask them, okay, how are you quantifying or measuring success of your paid marketing at the moment? And they say, oh well, we have a great ROAS on Facebook or Google. And then you dig in and say, so you trust the ROAS from Facebook and Google, do you? And nobody will say yes. They all say no, we don't. Because the problem is, and you see this as well, you log into Facebook and you log into Google, and they're both trying to claim the same sale. Everybody listening to this podcast has seen this. Often you'll see 50K in Meta ads and 50K in Google, and then you log into Shopify and you might have 80K in revenue. And that all hasn't come from paid marketing. So there's huge double counting going on for both parties. And that just means that business owners are in a position where they're spending more than they ever have. And they're basically quantifying the biggest expense in the business on a metric that they don't trust at all. And I think that is just a recipe for disaster. And it's just not a really efficient way to run a business. So essentially what we're trying to do is we figured out how to get to a figure called contribution margin. And don't get scared, that's not an accounting term. Really what we're trying to understand is, as you spend more or less on marketing, I'm actually not as focused on your sales. I want to understand your profit after that spend. So if you've increased your spend by 20% this month, okay, yes, we can look at your sales, but I don't really care about your sales that much. I want to understand, as you've spent more on your marketing, has that meant that you've driven more or less profit as a result? If you've driven more profit as a result of that increase, in my book, you have the green light to spend more again next month. If, for instance, you've increased spend by 20%, sales are gone up slightly, previously you might think that was a good idea, but maybe what might have happened is spend could be up by 20%, sales up by 10%. Your profit after marketing spend could actually be down by 10%. The only data that we're taking from Facebook and Google in that instance is how much you've spent. Well, I'm not looking at ROAS anywhere in that equation there. So this is a really, really true reflection of your e-commerce business. And obviously, once we plug you in, you can look back over the last 12 months and actually see, okay, we know in June, we took a bit of a punt and we spent 50% more on marketing. We can have a quick retro on that and see, was that actually within the business's best interest, or maybe the business owner has a hunch that it wasn't really useful or it wasn't very beneficial, but I don't actually have the data to back it up. StoreHero will quickly articulate that value to you and show you, was the increased spend actually worth it for the business?
I think that's really important because as someone who, like, a long time ago tried to run an e-commerce business, and I ended up doing more sales offline than online, yeah, you wouldn't know, were you making a profit? That was the whole thing. You'd never know unless you were crunching numbers every day on top of all your other activities. So I think that's kind of like, that is really important. Like back then I wasn't spending on ads. It was pretty much like your mum's business. I was relying on organic stuff to get the sales. But so many businesses out there might be losing money, which brings me to just one more thing. And I'm not sure if this is your ballpark at all, which is about discounts. Because we see discounts everywhere. Oh, I'm not getting enough sales. I'll run a sale. I'll run a discount. Obviously, there's a danger in that. So what are your thoughts about that?
I could talk for 5 hours in this one, Amanda. Discounting, yeah. Look, it's a necessary evil in some instances. What you don't want to get into is a habit where, end of the month, you're not hitting your numbers and you just go on 20-30% this blanket sale and, you hit your numbers. That's a really bad way to run your business because you're just training your customer to wait for the discount. And if you haven't priced that discount in day one into your margins and your forecast for the year, you're going to find it very hard to be profitable. The problem I see with a lot of businesses is that, to that point, it's not baked in at the very start of the year. And yes, your Facebook ROAS will improve and, you probably will hit your sales figure. But if you've gone on 20 or 30% discount, you've probably eroded all of the margin to get there. And that's a really, really difficult position to be in. Discounts can be useful to clear age stock, to, promote a new product, but use them very sparingly because once you get into the habit of, doing the monthly 20-30% discount, it's very, very, very hard to reverse that cycle and train your customers to shop otherwise at full price. Particularly, and this probably sounds counterintuitive, as your Facebook ads are getting more and more expensive. If you're going to erode all of your margin through discounting, that coupled with the rising customer acquisition cost, your margin is just getting squeezed everywhere. And that's a hard position to be in for businesses. So, one of the things we do have in the platform is the ability to see your customer lifetime value. So you can see month over month. Okay, let's look at August, for instance. We acquired 700 new customers. On average, it cost us €20 to acquire a customer. And the gross profit on the first purchase was, €5. Okay, now let's look at September. Maybe we acquired 800 new customers. The average customer acquisition cost was maybe, a small drop, €18, but we were on a 20% discount. So maybe the gross profit on first purchase came back to like 20 quid or whatever it's going to be. So you're just trying to understand for businesses, as you're dialing up and down discounting, A, how is that affecting the number of new customers you have? B, how is it affecting the cost to acquire a customer? But C, and which is probably the most importantly, how is that affecting the gross profit on that first purchase? Because, that's the most crucial part of it all. And it probably goes back to one point I consistently challenge a lot of business owners on is, what are you actually measuring? What are you striving for? Most people tell me sales growth. I want to hit X amount of sales this year. I honestly think that's a really poor way to run your business. I think you need to start with, there's a really good book out there. I recommend anyone listening to this podcast should read it. It's called Profit First by Mike Mikulovich. Probably butchered that pronunciation of that name, but you get the picture. Essentially what that is essentially putting, like, what profit do you want as a business owner? And then basically building back and saying, okay, to hit that profit figure, how much sales do I need? This is my operating cost to run the business. This is my gross margin. So starting with the bottom in mind first, as opposed to the top. And the reason I say that to people is that because if you're a business and you want to hit 500K this year and you get to the end of November, it's kind of coupled with this, another point I'll come to in a second, but if you are a business that's, you want to hit 500K for the year, you're coming to the end of November, you're not there. If your sole North Star for the business is to hit that 500K for the year, you might just go heavy into discounting to drive your revenue up. You might go heavy into paid marketing to drive your revenue up. And you know what? You probably get there. Now, have you had a successful year? Depends on what you're measuring. Back to my original point, you may have hit that 500K mark, but if you've just done the heavy discounting coupled with the really big spike in marketing spend, there's a good chance you've hit your number, but you may have lost a ton of money on the back end. So trying to sit down day one, figure out what your profit goal is, be realistic with it. We all want 10 million in the first year. I'm only messing. But, be realistic of what your profit goal is. If it's break even, that's also completely fine. But just reverse engineer it. Here's my profit goal. Here's my staff, my rent, my operating costs. Here's my gross margin. And, this is how many sales it's going to take me to actually hit those numbers. That's a really important piece that not enough small business owners are looking at. Start with profit first, read that book, and stop just simply measuring your sales revenue, because I'm seeing way too many businesses, really struggling as a result of just focusing on top line revenue when really they set the business up to turn a profit, and it's often an afterthought, or let's see what happens at the end of the year. You can reverse engineer it, and often you'll be surprised with how it changes how you look at your business every day.
I love that point, because I am one of those people who has a revenue goal, but I'm also one of those people that's very tight on my profits. I am, as I said, I didn't want to crush numbers all day. I do. I keep an eye on everything to make sure I'm profitable. But I feel like I need to slap myself in the face now, because I never thought of just setting a profit goal instead of a revenue goal. That makes so much sense. So if there's one thing I've learned from this interview, it's 100% that. So thanks for that. That's fabulous. I want to keep talking to you all day long, but I need to close the podcast. So I'm going to come on to our quick fire questions. So firstly, data, or data?
Data.
Data, really? Really? You're letting me down. You're Irish. You're supposed to say data.
I don't have a strong opinion of
it. You had to think about it as well. What is it that you do say? So cookies, when you get a cookie banner, do you dunk it or do you delete it?
I actually usually accept them. I'm just more interested in the ads. Most people hit no. I'm genuinely more curious about what kind of marketing they're doing. It's probably just the inner marketer in me. I usually accept them.
So do I. And I was actually, when I first found out that people actually do decline them, I was kind of shocked. I didn't realize that happened, but now I see in my own stats from my own cookie thing, so many people do. Okay, and third question is AI, yay or nay?
Oh, massive yay, 100%. Look, this is fundamentally going to change how every business operates, and even going back to that lean operating cost piece. There's so much that you can do at the moment, even with ChatGPT, that it will get so much better again over time. But the efficiencies that you can drive from various AI tools at the moment is absolutely incredible. Everything from writing great email customer copy, to spreadsheet enablement, to, writing macros in Google Sheets. I'm not an expert in Excel or Google Sheets, but thanks to ChatGPT, I can write these really long, complex formulas that would have taken me years to figure out how to do. So, it's as good as the prompt that you'll give it, is what I'd say. And a problem I see a lot of brands, or, people in general, struggling with how to navigate ChatGPT is giving it a very, very generic prompt and not being happy with the results. But you can go so deep with it. One thing we've actually just launched quite recently within the platform is, in the StoreHero platform, is, one challenge that business owners have with the tool like us sometimes is that there's a lot of numbers there, and it's hard to understand what it all means. So once you log into the StoreHero platform now, you set what your goals are. So you set that profit goal. And basically every metric has, versus last week or last year, but also versus target. And basically there's an AI summary that crunches the whole numbers of the business and tells you a story as to what actually happened in the last week, what was good, what was bad, and what you need to focus on. That's just a small thing that we're doing to try, from an AI capacity, to basically try and just crunch the numbers for you and tell you what to do, instead of you needing to understand all of these million acronyms I just mentioned in the course of the last half an hour. StoreHero will just crunch them, explain to them what they are, and really just give you your to-do list in terms of what's good, what's bad, what you need to work on in order to hit those profit goals that you've set yourself.
Wow, that sounds amazing. And I'm so happy you are an AI advocate, because I'm kind of like, it's not being an advocate, it's just part of my toolkit. And those macros, absolutely, in Google Sheets, when I'm analysing data, they're a lifesaver, because if I'm trying to pluck those out of my head, so that's not happening. So absolutely.
Never. Well, not for me anyway.
I'm sure I could learn it, but hey, AI can do it for me, so it's all good.
Absolutely.
I know you have a podcast, which I think I was going to suggest to everyone they followed you on LinkedIn, because that's where I follow you and I see this sort of wisdom every day from you on LinkedIn. So where apart from LinkedIn, where do they find you on LinkedIn? Where else should people find you?
Yeah, we're on LinkedIn at Thomas Gleeson. We are on Twitter with the StoreHero account, on YouTube. That's where we run our podcast on. It's also on Spotify as well. Just type in StoreHero podcast, you'll find it. We're on TikTok, we're on Instagram. We're not on Facebook actually, but we're everywhere else.
Good, great. So, and I hear you have an ebook.
We are, it's the 4th. We're recording this on the 4th of September, but we're about to release it now this afternoon. So
wow.
I'm really looking forward to getting that out there. We've about 20 to 25 really good contributors. And we've really just distilled, maybe a lot of the messaging that I've spoken to in the last 30 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever it's been, around, really getting your e-commerce business ready for a really profitable Q4. And we have some really good contributors in there trying to break down a lot of the kind of key points that we would have touched on in this, maybe in a lot more detail. So it's free to download. You can head over to our website, storehero.ai, and there's a little banner up the top there to download our Q4 ebook this year. I'd recommend everyone download it. There's loads and loads of really good and valuable information there. And obviously, if anyone has any questions on any of the content in there, just feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or by email at thomas@storehero.ai. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Great. Thanks so much for being a guest on this first series of That Analytics podcast. And we'll see you again.
Thanks very much, Amanda. Lovely to be on.
I feel now that there are a whole lot of other things that I need to measure on top of the things that I'm on top of already. For example, yes, I still measure my turnover. I'm still obsessed by turnover. It's less of an issue for a service-based business, but unless you're focusing on profit, you know what you're going to get? You're going to get good turnover and not profit. So I'm going to go and rewrite my goals straight away and make sure I'm focusing on the right thing. Thomas mentioned a lot of resources in that show. If you want to grab those resources, get the links for those resources, you can head over to spiderworking.com /TAP8. That's spiderworking.com/TAP8.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.